Hello, and welcome to another edition of BNEWS In Depth. I'm your host, Rich Hosford. Students will be returning to full in-person classes this fall, but things are not exactly back to normal. Due to recommendations from the state, masks will be mandated in all school buildings with very few exceptions. Administrators are also working hard to make sure all students have a smooth transition from either full remote or hybrid learning and have brought in additional support to help everyone have a successful year. So the return of school is our topic this month, and we'll begin our discussion with Superintendent Eric Conti and kick things off with a talk about the new mask mandate. We got a lot to get to, so let's get started. I'm now joined by Burlington Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Eric Conti, to give us the latest updates from what is being told from the state, national, local levels. Eric, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome, Rich.
So I know the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education just came out with some guidance yesterday. The CDC came out with some guidance last week. What are you being told?
The CDC guidance was several weeks ago, and that gave us a national picture where they were encouraging masking indoors. Mm-hmm. And that was for everyone, reinstituting masking. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education then released local guidance with the Mass Department of Public Health on Friday afternoon. One of the challenges we've had in waiting for that is that it didn't align with the CDC's recommendations. And several of the reasons they gave were that the vaccinate in Massachusetts is higher than in some other states that the CDC has to consider. I think the work we've done since then is to consult with our local Board of Health. Again, Susan Luminello has always been extremely helpful. She continues to be. And then we looked at some other data points that we had. And the conclusion that we reached is starting on Monday, so August 9th, band camp starts. We're going to start to have students back in the building. So August 9th, we're going to mandate that everyone be in a mask indoors. So I'm sure that would even include BCAT offices for indoor activities. So for the start of the school year, all indoor activities are going to be, we're requiring everyone to wear a mask. All students, all staff, and that's whether you are vaccinated or unvaccinated. So we're going to have everyone in masks. And again, there are some primary reasons for that, is we're going to have about 600 more students inside the buildings than we had last year, because that's about the number of students who remained remote from March of 2020. And in addition, for our 12 and over population that are eligible to be vaccinated, our vaccination rate is been about 60%. So what I'd like to do is have families, again, consult with their pediatricians and other healthcare professionals, but if we could get that vaccination rate of students up closer to 90%, I would feel much more comfortable at the secondary level, or for 12 and older students, right, lifting some of the mandate. But I think for the start of the school year, with what we don't know about the Delta variant, we're going to have all students and staff come back to school in masks.
Yeah. Are you allowed to, ask people if they've been vaccinated? Is that something that is even possible to do?
I think we can survey. I don't think there's anything against us surveying. I'm not sure that we can require people to answer the survey. So,
right.
So I'm not sure how accurate that information would be. I think we're just trying to be proactive with the information that we have and encourage any unvaccinated adult or child over 12 to consult with their doctor or a healthcare expert, and to weigh what they believe are the risks. And I hope that they would make the decision to be vaccinated. But
Right.
again, that's up to them. I can't control their decision or their behavior, but the limited sort of part of this that I can control is that, again, we'll be masked for indoor activities. There's no need for masking outdoors for any outdoor activities, so those will be unmasked. And I think if people are working in indoor spaces by themselves or in an isolated office, then there's no requirement for a mask at that point either.
Right. And will any of the other, sort of safety measures be in place, like, single direction hallways or any alteration to the cafeteria?
Again, I think the spacing is going to be more difficult, and I'm not sure with masks has proven to be as necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But we're probably going to look a lot like we did last spring. So again, everyone indoors will be masked. We are more than likely going to have to feed elementary and middle school students in their classrooms in terms of lunch.
Yeah.
High school, we're working on a bit of a different scenario, just because the schedule doesn't work. If we have to feed a limited number of students over the period of the day, so we would need to go from 2 lunches to 4 lunches, which I know is probably too much information for people, but it's just very disruptive. So we're working on a different solution for high school. So we're really going to look like we did last spring. The environmental precautions we took in terms of cleaning the air filters, having windows open, making sure the air exchange rates are as maximized as possible. Those are all going to be continued. Masks are required on all buses, even though the capacity limit has been lifted. So we'll have full buses, but everyone on the bus is required to wear a mask. And we're also asking that the windows be open at least 4 inches.
Okay.
So again, the buses will be running at full capacity for anyone who wants a seat on the bus, but everyone on the bus will be required to be masked.
It's not quite the full back to normal that we were kind of hoping for.
Right, and it's been changing very quickly, very recently. So I was hoping for a more typical opening,
Yeah.
and I think over the last week or two, with the spikes that they've been seeing, with the infection rates that they've been seeing in other places, it's really causing us to take action and to try to be as cautionary as possible without complete information. I'll be the first to admit that we don't know everything yet about the Delta variant. There is an opportunity. Some southern states open schools earlier than we do. So they
Yeah.
open in sort of, I think, this week or next week.
Yeah, some are already open.
So it may give us several weeks of data to look at in terms of what their experiences are with students and learn from that. So we're just trying to be as cautionary as possible. If in 4 to 8 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, we learn that the Delta variant is sort of ebbing and infections are dropping and vaccination rates are increasing, we'll revisit the decisions that we're making. But we're trying to make the best decisions given the information that we have at present. And as you know, it tends to change very quickly.
Yeah.
And all of the expert groups aren't necessarily in alignment. So again, the American Academy of Pediatricians last year recommended that students be in school. They were a strong voice in why we reopened and had students in school, even with the mitigation factors. For this fall, that same group is recommending that all students be masked, even though that's not what the Massachusetts Department of Public Health are asking. So again, if we followed the American Academy of Pediatricians last year, it's confusing to me why we wouldn't be following them this year as well. So
Right.
Again, and as with all of this, you can find groups that represent your perspective and almost every decision that has to be made. And we are choosing, I think, the most conservative course and trying to be as cautious as we can and feel like it would be easier for us to lift restrictions than to put restrictions on after the fact when it may be too late.
All right.
Well, and that's sort of like, the most up-to-date kind of information, but bigger picture, I know there's a lot of work being done to sort of help students sort of transition from the weirdness of last year into this year.
Mm-hmm.
We got new positions coming on. Talk about some of the things that you're doing to help, get kids maybe back up to speed, but also to address, mental, well-being as well.
Well, we're taking a strong look at data. So what I would say in the data that we've seen, and I'll focus on elementary just because that's what I have looked at most recently and what's in my head, students made a tremendous amount of growth last year. And I think that's reflective of the hard work that our teachers and principals put in to make sure their learning experience was very positive. So we had student learning happening. So the term learning loss that I hear all the time really wouldn't describe the elementary Burlington experience last year. Where we did potentially see some learning loss was a year ago spring when we first closed schools down and we were all scrambling and reacting and didn't really have a whole lot of time. So, but we seem to have made up that ground last year. So I think we're in a very good place in terms of where students are academically because of the hard work, again, of teachers and principals. What we are being told to look out for are students who've been out of school now for 16 months and need to make an adjustment to be back to in-person learning. A lot of that adjustment may be really positive, so I don't want to discount that. But some of the new positions that you've discussed is we have a director of mental health who's looking at coordinating our mental health services. We have mental health supports at the preschool, elementary, middle, and high school, but we didn't really have a coordinated framework across all the levels. So this director is going to help us do that. It's, again, Chrissy Robinson, who's been in the district at the high school as an adjustment counselor. She's going to be taking on that new responsibility and helping us coordinate our mental health support services and reaching out to families. We have a director of sort of recovery or acceleration, which we're looking at as being a temporary position as a result of the pandemic. And some of her work has been to look at I believe she told me 636 students who've been fully remote for since March of 2020, and looking at the different learning styles of those students, who's a child with a disability, who's a child that needs language support. And I think she's going to be reaching out to those families, contacting those families to ask in terms of what sort of transition help that they may see in their child, and just working with those families. That's a large group of kids who we haven't seen in person, again, since March of 2020. And then, again, we have Jennifer Knight, our Director of Family and Community Engagement. She's actually been in the district since last January. She's really helping us make sure we connect with all families, even the families who don't traditionally connect easily or well with the school district, to make sure we're not leaving everyone behind. Our new Director of Equity and Inclusion and Diversity, Ray Porch, who you've met, again, is another incredible resource to help us with our learning. He's just a learning expert, Rich. So I'm just saying he's just helping us in general. So I just think he's another incredible asset that we have in the district, and has a great perspective, and we're all learning from Ray, and so I think he's helping us there. We have a Director of Literacy, again, K-12. We've had that position. We're just expanding the role to do more, again, coordinating of our literacy framework, pre-K through grade 12. Most of that coordination has happened at the elementary level, but we're looking to expand at the secondary. And again, that was an existing position. We're just expanding the responsibilities. I think we've added more counseling services, or another person to make counseling available, and math and literacy specialists at Fox Hill, because Fox Hill has outgrown Memorial in terms of their student population, and we have the need to have some equity because we have those supports at Memorial, so we're trying to place those supports at Fox Hill as well. because we have growing enrollment at the elementary level too. So
Yeah.
we talked about that at the
No.
last school committee meeting. And since the last school committee meeting, we've had 17 new students registered at the elementary level. So we're growing and trying to keep an eye on our class sizes, and we're running out of classrooms. But so that all needs to happen in the next 2 to 3 weeks, right? Because
Yes.
we're ready to start.
Okay, it's coming fast.
Yep.
It's a quick summer, unfortunately. I know you mentioned, that you don't necessarily agree with the term learning loss, especially at the elementary level, but is there, as far as like maybe some of the older students, just a way of looking back and just to make sure that, they have the building blocks that they need? Like, you're thinking math, you need step A and then B, C to get to D.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like a way for teachers to go back and sort of, just make sure that the students did get what they needed last year?
Yeah, again, our teachers are experts, but I think they do that at the start of school every year already, is to figure out where their students are and what they need, and they'll focus on that. All I'm saying is that I think from what I've seen in the data, the quality of instruction that occurred last year was very high. It may have looked different, and it may have occurred remotely as opposed to in person, but there's evidence that it was effective. So I do think every year our teachers look at where their students are, how they come into them, how they present. Some students regress over summers, others don't. But I'm saying that happens every year for us, and again, our teachers are experts, and I think really meet every student where they are, and they know where they need to get to. So that's the science and the magic and the professionalism and all the other things that go with teaching, and we're fortunate that we have a very talented group.
And just a couple last things. One, just a message to parents, who are obviously watching the news, seeing all the new spikes, Delta variant. Just, I know that from talking to you and from covering the department in the town that, you mentioned working with the Board of Health. Just, what you would say to parents, just to let them know that, everything is being done to make sure that, everybody's, safe and healthy.
I'm not sure I could say it better than that, Rich. And there's going to be people who support decisions we make. There are going to be people who don't. And I know that can be frustrating. I'm frustrated. I didn't want to start the school year having to worry about some of the pandemic adjustments we've had to make over the last year plus. So I understand their frustration. I'm going to err on the side of student safety sort of every single time. And I understand there's, everything today gets politicized, and I'm trying to educate myself as best I can, listen to groups of experts, and thinking about our schools as an entire community. And parents need to advocate for their children and their individual families, and that's absolutely what they should be doing. And there may be situations where the decision for the entire community may not be the best fit for their individual child, and we always look to try to work with them. But that's the perspective that I'm coming from, and I hope that people understand. If things continue to move in the right direction, and our vaccination rates continue to go up, and the prevalence of the variants and other aspects of COVID decline, I'll be the first one with my mask off. So it's not enjoyable for me, but I do again appreciate the frustration that comes with it. I'm going to have a lot of employees who are frustrated. It's very hard to teach and be in a building with kids all day in a mask. I understand that, and so I know I'm asking a lot of people, but I do think it's the right thing to do from the information I have right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's all a balancing act.
So that's what I would say. And we'll work with anybody, we'll listen, and we'll make adjustments as needed.
Mm-hmm. Well, I understand. I know you put a lot of thought and contemplation into all these decisions, so I appreciate you coming on and talking about the process and how you got there.
No, Rich, and again, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I think we're going to try to establish a regular time with BCAT to just communicate, so we'll work on that. This is the first sort of large-scale public announcement about the mask mandate. There will be a letter that goes out to all families and staff, and then we're putting together a list of frequently asked questions as a part of the letter, and then we'll be updating that list of frequently asked questions. So again, do I need a mask on a bus? What's going to happen for fall sports? We know there's going to be a lot of specific questions that we're going to try to answer as part of our frequently asked questions, moving forward. And there may be some discrepancies between communities. We met together as a Middlesex League last week, so those are the 12 surrounding communities. People at that time were in different places in regards to what they were doing with masks. And again, I'm responsible for the decision in Burlington, not in any other community.
Right.
And so that's the decision I'm making. But without a state, sort of a state mandate for everybody, you're going to have differences. And again, I'm feeling like I'm making the best decision for Burlington. And so I already know I'm going to get an email that someone else is doing something differently than we are, and I appreciate that and respect that community's decision, ability to make that decision. And for continued communication before the start of school, and then we are again, staff and families will begin to receive more regular communication between now and the start of the school year.
Absolutely. Well, you're always welcome to come in and use our resources to communicate with the community. So
all right.
That's open invitation for any time.
And next time we'll be in masks. So
yeah.
So
back to that.
Back to that.
All right. Well, until then, I appreciate you taking some time today once again, and best of luck with the start of the new school year.
All right. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
We go now to a conversation with Burlington High School Director of Counseling Joe Attubato to see what their plans are to help ensure student mental health and well-being. Let's take a look.
I'm joined by BHS Support Services Coordinator Joe Attubato, who's going to talk about how his department is getting ready for the upcoming school year. Joe, thanks for taking some time and joining us.
No problem at all. Thank you.
I would like to start looking back, at last year. It was a struggle, and I kind of get the sense that people sort of rose to the occasion. Can you talk about, like your department, the teachers and the students, just what kind of from your perspective, how you kind of sort of see how everybody kind of met the challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, the fact that we started 10 days late was a huge adjustment. Those 10 days we really had to plan and organize and get ourselves together for the hybrid year that we started out. And at this point, it seems like it was 10 years ago.
I know.
And so I think the teachers did a great job because there was a lot of curveballs thrown at them to start the year. We had to change schedules. Teachers had to integrate, fully remote students into several classes. And so, in looking back with the teachers, they really were able to prepare themselves and organize themselves to manage the students. I think the students did a great job. Again, it was tough being hybrid, not here every day, and students did the best they could. In fact, some students, I think, liked the model.
Sure.
I think from a learning perspective.
Stay in their pajamas.
Exactly. But I think also that was part of it, the comfort level, being able to still access curriculum at home on their days where they wouldn't come into the building. And then the counseling staff, it was definitely an interesting year for us as well because, we typically have always met with students live. So now we had to really prepare ourselves to start to meet with students virtually because we did have about 140 students that were fully remote that counselors still had to connect with. And so I think from the social emotional end of things, I think it was a tough year for a lot of students, adjustment-wise. And so we still provided our traditional academic services that we've done in the past, but I think we did have to put our social emotional hats on a lot more this year. Meeting with students that may be struggling with getting into the building, even on the 2 days, dealing with the nervousness around spreading, COVID at the time. So things were still, even at the beginning of the year, a little nerve-wracking. The setup around lunch, students weren't able to sit with friends anymore. So that was a challenge. And so I think we certainly like I said, put on our social, emotional hats a lot more on our staff. And then just general organization of things we had to change as well. Again, we were very cognizant of the fact that when we met with students, students are only in the building twice a week. And so they need to be in their classes. And so we had to really organize ourselves to make sure, if we're going to meet with a student live, we don't want to take them out of a class that they're only in live twice a week. So that was another challenge that we really had to kind of endure. But again, I think we, some of our events we streamlined, meaning we pre-recorded some of our traditional events that BCAT always films for us, which you still help us with.
Happy to do it.
Yep. So we pre-record a lot of events, which was good and bad. It was good to be able to kind of pre-plan and do those types of events to get word out about college planning, academic planning. But I did miss the spontaneity of questions and things like that. So I think that's where we took a hit a little bit. But parents could still certainly email us, but I feel like that interaction was missing. So, and I think as the year went on, we essentially had, I felt like, 2 school years in one. Because when students transitioned back, again, we really had to prepare for that, not just physically with desks, but also, getting back to organizing ourselves with 1,000 kids in the building as opposed to 500. So I think all in all, it was, again, a year for the record books for sure. We all learned a lot. We all really do have a better idea of what we value, and that's relationships. And I think that's one thing our staff did. One other thing, too, that we did throughout the year is we did meet pretty often about at-risk students we were concerned about, students having any issues at all. We had a pretty consistent meeting time that we would meet, not just the counseling staff, but our school psychologists, teachers were involved. So we really tried to 2 to 3 times a month meet to discuss any issues that we saw, either issues in the moment or issues on the rise. And we do anticipate next year will be challenges as well.
Yeah, I guess that must have been kind of one of the harder parts of having the virtual thing rather than meeting students in person, is sort of identifying needs. It must be kind of easier to do that when you actually have the student in front of you rather than on a computer screen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes not just student-to-student interactions, but staff to parent, staff to staff. It's much harder to read the room or to read the student, and I think that does definitely pose a challenge. And then the added layer, and this is more so for the teachers, but oftentimes students, you wouldn't even see them. You would see their screensaver or their picture.
Right.
So then you really have a hard time. I think from a teacher's perspective, that was a challenge as well. How do you know that the student is there?
Yeah, exactly.
But in addition to that, how do you know they're really understanding what's going on if you're not actually seeing them and interacting with them?
Yeah. So what's, as you're sort of preparing for the upcoming school year, how is this summer, different from last summer, different from other summers, and how maybe is it, similar to summers that were not 2020?
Yeah. For us in the counseling office, I think that we're doing things very similar to in the past, meaning one of our responsibilities is the school schedule. And so we are meeting with students again this year to rectify any schedule issues. We want students to have a full schedule, staff to have rosters, everything set and ready to go to start the year. The big difference, I guess, last year is these appointments were over the phone. At that time, we weren't having any live student meetings. This year, we are having the live student meetings, so students actually come in to make the schedule changes, which I am happy about. I like to see students' faces and interact with them a little bit, and I think it's good for the students as well. So last summer, it was very similar in the sense that we're still fixing schedules, but as we approached mid to late August last year, that's when things really started to solidify in terms of the cohorts and the dividing up of the developing the schedule. I really do think the 2 weeks at the beginning of the year was huge. We really used those those full 14 days,
Yeah.
including the weekends, but we used every day of that to plan and prepare. So last summer, again, started out very similarly for the most part, and then once we hit late August, that's when things really became, close to overwhelming, but we got through it. And this year it does feel like it's a little bit back to normalcy and preparing for a traditional school year.
Yeah. And now I know, there were a number of students that were full remote last year. Is there anything, extra being done to sort of help them ease back into a regular schedule?
Yeah, so we're very, very fortunate in Burlington, and I'm sure if you're interviewing Dr. Conti, he's going to make a reference to this, but we were able to receive money for recovery, any kind of COVID recovery things within the school. I think it's across the district, but at the high school, we specifically used it for summer credit recovery. So we have students here this summer that are participating in summer credit recovery, and that's just a way for us to allow students that really had a difficult time academically, that may not have either passed or really grasped the material, are able to come in, and a Burlington High School teacher is able to essentially teach them so they can recover what they've missed. So that, I think, is a great option. We have about 40 to 50 students here coming in over the summer. Going into next year, some of which are remote. Going into the school year, we, in the counseling world anyway, we were able to get a recovery counselor, which is actually an added staff member to our staff.
Right.
We're very excited about this. One of the tasks of this person is going to be to reach out to remote students that were remote for the year, and check in with them, kind of gauge where they're at, and have a process in place to make sure they can adjust back to the traditional school, because they've been out, some of them, for 16 months.
Right.
In addition to that population, we are probably going to have this recovery counselor meet with other pockets of students that may have been impacted by this, whether social emotionally, whether English is not their first language, whether they have a learning disability. So she's going to work with students in certain pockets too. So I think the recovery council is designed to help some of groups and pockets of students make that adjustment back to school. So we're really excited about having this added person to our staff. And the counseling staff, one of the things that we're going to be working on is group work. So the counselors this year, we are going to try to implement essentially executive functioning groups, which is basically working with smaller groups of students to plan, prepare, and organize themselves academically. We just think the last year, again, very challenging for a lot of students. Students are going to be back in the building every day. They're going to have to get themselves organized. They're going to have to get their ducks in a row. And so these small group interactions, I think, are designed to kind of help those students as well. And that would be the entire counseling staff. We also plan to prepare and organize anxiety groups, so smaller, again, meeting with students in smaller groups to talk about some coping strategies and some ways to work around any anxieties they have. Again, that would be for all students.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody is sort of have a heightened anxiety levels from all of this.
Yeah, and one of the good things that I'm really excited about this year is we're going to implement an advisory program. And so what the advisory program can do for us is small groups of students will each be assigned to a staff member. We're hoping maybe around 10 students would be assigned to a staff member within the school, and they would meet once or twice a month and have different topics they could talk about. So it allows the entire student body to have one go-to person that they can connect with.
Right. One group, I think that maybe is, especially anxious coming into this new year would be the incoming freshman class. I know obviously every year there's programming available for them. Is there anything different this year?
Well, we're gonna offer our orientation live, which will be a good thing. One other interesting thing that's going to happen this year is you referenced freshmen, and in a way, it's all new to them anyway. So we kind of felt like the current sophomores, freshmen going into sophomore year,
Right.
some of them never got a chance to either come into the building or in the building in a limited capacity. So our traditional freshman orientation is going to include sophomores if they choose to be part of that this year.
Yeah.
So that will be
Makes
new.
sense.
So yeah, they're gonna be able to come in. And then beyond that, I think this advisory program, hopefully, we're hoping to get it up and running late September, early October. I think that would be another opportunity to allow freshmen and other kids to all feel connected and comfortable with the school and the building. But now that the building's open, and right now there's no limit on students coming in, but students could come in and do a self-guided tour. And again, our orientation will be a live orientation where students will be able to, freshmen particularly, will be able to come into the building. They get to meet the administration. They hear from a couple counselors. They hear from the athletic department. And so that is the traditional orientation that we would typically offer.
Right. Okay. Now, so I know, just being out and about and also meeting with some of the students here for different things. I know masks aren't mandated anymore, but I have the assumption that some people are going to still want to wear them. Is there any messaging to be sort of like to tell everybody just kind of let people do what they are comfortable with?
Absolutely. I would say that goes for students, staff, parents. I think if someone prefers to wear a mask, they can absolutely wear a mask. And I think that's going to probably be the case, especially with now you hear in the news that the media about the Delta variant and
Right.
kind of how that's going to play out. I think masks right now, again, like you said, not mandated. That could even change. But at this point, if a student prefers to wear a mask, they can absolutely wear one.
Okay. And I guess kind of, last couple things. I know part of what you do is help students get ready for, applications to college. How was that impacted last year? And do you think, it'll be back more to normal this year?
Yeah, I mean, it was the nuts and bolts of the college application process were very similar to in years past, but I think how we communicated and connected with students changed. So we still met with our seniors. I think we tried to do a lot more one-to-one meetings and still took advantage of virtual meetings just as did the teachers. We found that students applied overall to less colleges, not as many. And in addition to that, we found that with the SATs not being a requirement, we had students applying to colleges that they typically wouldn't because a lot of schools weren't requiring them. They're
Right.
really looking closely at the GPA. So I think that students, when they thought about their list, they made it a little bit numbers-wise less of an amount.
Right.
And for this year, we really are excited to hopefully get back to the, again, traditional approach. We, again, learned a lot of things through the pandemic, and we know that certain types of meetings we can have with parents, we can include them virtually now, which we may not have done before. And we actually just sent an email today to seniors. We're going to have a college application boot camp, which last year was virtual and it was a little bit more of a challenge. This year will be live in the building, and seniors, rising seniors, can come into the building, and we're going to do a workshop on the common application, and then a couple of counselors, including myself, will be available to answer a variety of questions. So that is a way for seniors to really get the ball rolling and things taken care of before the fall.
Right.
Because the fall, everything's going to be senior year, fall of senior year is usually very busy, and so we really encourage seniors to start doing some things over the summer. So this boot camp is back to being a live session, and we're really excited about that to help the senior class.
Excellent. All right. Well, I very much appreciate you coming down, taking some time, and I wish you and everybody else all the best in this upcoming school year.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Take care.
You too.
Finally, I had a chance to speak with Marshall Simons Middle School Principal Kari Perchase about their plans for the fall and how they expect to help incoming freshmen make the transition in this unique time. Let's check it out.
And I am now joined by Marshall Simons Middle School Principal Kari Perchase to talk about how that school is preparing for the upcoming year. Kari, thanks for taking some time and joining us this month.
Thanks for having us, Rich.
So before we get into the new upcoming year, I want to take a quick moment to look back at the last year, because I know, it was a struggle, it was difficult. How do you think, your teachers, your administration, and the students sort of handled, the strange year that we had?
It was a strange year, it was. I can't say enough for all members of our community, whether it was our students, our families, and our teachers. It wasn't always pretty. I've said this in various ways. It wasn't always pretty. It certainly wasn't easy, but we made it through, and we worked together. And I think that when you go through hard things, that you come together in different ways. So I see that as kind of a positive that came out of it, is that at the end of the year there was a real sense of community and togetherness, that wow, we did this, we made it through this monumental task. So I can't say enough great things about all the members of the community. They did a great job.
Yeah, I mean, it was difficult, but it did seem like people made it work, which is something, sort of a feather in the cap.
Sure.
And so what are some of the things that are happening this summer that maybe are different than other summers?
So I would say that different from last summer is that we are planning for a full return to our typical schedule. So we had started a new schedule in 2020, which was a 6-day rotating schedule. So we are planning on that. There's always, as we know now, there's always possibilities that there could be changes, but we're looking forward to returning to that. So right now, the administrative team is really working on scheduling the building in that fashion. With that being said, we're very cognizant, and we started conversations in the spring, that our students, 2/3 of our students will not have had that experience with that schedule. So last year's 6th graders, who will be our 7th graders this year, and then our upcoming 6th graders. So we're gonna have to be really deliberate with how we support their understanding of the schedule. 2/3 of our students haven't had lunch in the cafeteria, which sounds like kind of a trivial thing. Everybody, oh, you get your lunch and you sit down, but it can be really kind of a stressful situation going into a cafeteria with 250 other students. So that's something that we need to make sure that we're preparing students for and supporting their entry into the cafeteria. 2/3 of our students would not have opened a locker before, which is kind of like a rite of passage with middle school. So that's something that at the end of the year we worked with our 6th grade students on, and will continue. So there is an acknowledgement that we're going to have to enter into the school year differently. And I think that we'll be prepared for that. But I think in many ways, this summer is more like summers in the past, and it's just being more thoughtful and intentional with how we're going to support students return to school.
Yeah. And is there, what are some of the changes from last year as far as like safety protocols in the building? I know, do you still have the one-way traffic, or what sort of like things that were in place last year that are not going to be in place this year?
So I would say that with the return to the 6-day rotating schedule, students will be moving instead of the teachers. So when you ask, how did teachers do last year? They were the ones that were on carts moving from one room to the other. So we're going to go back to having kids move, and I think that that makes it challenging to keep one way and do different things. So a lot of those protocols, we'll wait and see what the guidance is. So what we've communicated all along is we're going to go back to what our schedule was, and then we'll make adjustments, and hopefully they're small adjustments based on what the current guidance is. So that'll be something. Health and safety is always going to be an important piece. So we'll continue to have hand sanitizer out, continue to encourage hand washing, mask wearing likely for unvaccinated folks. But again, all that will be contingent upon the guidance that we get from the state.
Yeah, I know we're here in the middle of July right now, and things are still sort of being decided on the state level. So I understand that we don't have all the answers, but as things progress, we'll continue reporting and continue reaching out to the community to make sure that they know. Are there definitely some safety protocols you mentioned mask wearing for unvaccinated people.
Well, that was so I would say that it again, it's all dependent, and that's what we're with our summer programming. That was the guidance that we're operating under. So I would say that we're going to really wait until what the state says, and then the district will disseminate that, and then we'll fall in line with that, whatever that guidance is and whatever the regulations are. In terms of other health and safety, I would say that it's a priority, and and we're waiting for that guidance. So we don't want to,
Yeah.
we can't plan for what it was, even, over the course of last year, in terms of when we cohorted students and it was at 6 feet distance, like we can't plan for that and then also plan for our regular schedule. So
Right.
we're planning for a typical return, and then we'll take steps backwards depending on what the guidance is.
Okay. And then, obviously, it's a stressful thing to be going to school during a pandemic. What's sort of like the balance between, focusing on curriculum and focusing on mental health?
So I think that if you're not healthy, whether it's physical health or mental health, then you're not able to learn. I think that the foundation of all learning is students feeling safe and comfortable and readiness. That contributes to the readiness to learn. So that needs to be our number one priority in terms of their physical and mental well-being. And then it's the relationships that we have with students and making sure that we are connecting with our students. And there were a couple things that we did last year that we are going to continue this year. One of them being an advisory program where there'll be smaller groups of students that are assigned to one faculty member in the building, and then have some deliberate social, emotional, and wellness type lessons that go throughout the year. So that's something that was on our kind of longer to-do list that we accelerated because of the pandemic, and that there's a real benefit to students. So we will continue to do that. I think that we will continue to respond to student needs. So there's the proactive piece, but then there's that, when students are struggling, making sure that we have the supports there and that we're able to partner with families to support them. So in terms of the curriculum, we need to make sure that, again, that students are feeling safe, welcome, that they have those strong relationships. And then from there, we need to continue to teach grade level content, knowing that they had a different experience. I think that we saw our students learn last year and grow academically in the classroom. So I think that while the concern is, in terms of being behind is a concern, I think that with some very deliberate assessment, and a lot of time when we think about assessment, it's that, big end of unit assessment. And what I'm saying is, no, we need to understand where kids are, where they're coming from, and where they currently are. So using a diagnostic tool in terms of their reading and mathematical skills, we'll continue to use iReady, which as a diagnostic tool that will give us information about individual students. And then from a curriculum standpoint, it's, before we teach the unit, we need to look at those prerequisite skills and not just assume that just because there was a disjointed year last year that the kids didn't learn that. We need to really figure out what skills they have and then fill in gaps based on their needs from there.
Yeah, so it's not just an assumption that the last year wasn't like, it was a complete waste or anything, because it wasn't.
Right.
Kids were learning, and just now it's time to sort of see exactly how well that went.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And not trying to put you on the spot for any numbers, but how many students, roughly, an idea of how many students when we're full remote that will be coming back, and is there anything being done to, specifically to sort of help that transition?
Sure. So in terms of the number of students, and I don't have the exact number, but
Sure.
it was about, as a school, it was about fewer than 150 last year.
Okay.
We did have opportunities, and some students felt comfortable in the spring to come back. So on April 26th, when we went to daily instruction, some students did come back that were fully remote, did come back into the building every day. And then even at the end of the year, some of the end of year celebrations, we did have students come back in for. So we did have some opportunities before we headed into the summer. Additionally, we invited all of our fully remote students to participate in our summer academy this year, which is it's a 2-week program focused on supporting math and reading, but it was an opportunity to bring folks back, bring fully remote students back into the building. So that was another opportunity that was available for students who participated in the fully remote model. And then I would say that we are going to welcome them back, and in the fall, and having not gone through this experience where we've had students and a number of students that were fully remote come back, we're not sure exactly what those needs are going to be. So we'll certainly monitor all students as they return into this school year, but certainly our fully remote students to see what they specifically need, because it's not an experience we've had before.
Right.
So we're going to have to be responsive and be aware, and go from there.
Yes, I know. Everything is all new.
Yes.
Now, I'm sure that there's always, efforts to sort of make the transition from elementary school to middle school, extra things that programming or something that you have for them. Is that modified at all this year, just based on, the situation?
So we have it's what we call WEB, which is where everyone belongs. It's the Web Orientation Program that we started in 2019. We did a virtual program last summer, and our web leaders, so we train rising 8th grade students to be web leaders, and they really run the day. Last summer we had to do it virtually, and it was still a way to get connected, and it wasn't quite the same. So we are planning on going forward with our web orientation program, and that is, I wrote the date, did I write that? I didn't write the date. I believe it's August 25th, Wednesday. So we're looking forward, and that'll be, in addition to the rising 6th graders, the incoming 6th graders, it's also any student who's new to Burlington, so they'll be able to come in, so whether they're transferring in as in 7th or 8th grade. In addition, we have a practice of kind of opening up our doors right before the first day of school. It'll be Thursday, August 26th. We'll get more information out there. But we literally just open up our doors, and students at that point know what teams they're on and who their teachers are, so they can kind of go visit the classroom and be back in the building. So we'll continue that practice as well. And then I think that this is backwards, but in the spring, myself and Bobby Concession, who's our 6th grade guidance counselor, and Jen Chen Fine, one of our assistant principals, we went to each one of the elementary schools to meet the 5th graders. We were able to do step-up days in the spring in June, where they came over to the middle school, so they were in the building. They got a tour. They got to see a little bit of what's to come. So we were able to provide a similar experience to students who were fully remote.
Okay, excellent. So, they have had opportunities to come in and sort of get themselves, familiar with the building and maybe their teachers.
Sure.
Going forward.
Sure.
Excellent. And I guess, kind of as we're wrapping up, just, any thoughts on just, the upcoming year as far as, your hopes and expectations about somewhat getting back to normal?
That is the hope and the expectation. So I think that there's a comfort that comes with going back into the routine, into 180 days and kind of a typical schedule and typical ebb and flow of the school year, where there was a lot of uncertainty last year. With that, I don't think it's a time where we can just revert back to all past practices, and I think it's really an opportunity to reflect and say, okay, what things were we forced to change last year that actually worked? And there were a number of things. So I'm actually hopeful that some of the practices that we had put into place will be able to continue. So things like our students will now bring home their iPads in grades. So that had been a practice at Burlington High School, where students got an iPad going into 9th grade, and they were able to take it home and have access to it at home and in school. At the middle school, they had access to an iPad, but it didn't go home. So we will continue sending iPads home with students, which then allows us to use technology consistently. So this year we relied an awful lot on Google Classroom as a content management system, and it's our intent to continue to use technology consistently for students and have that be a go-to place where teachers can kind of provide the information and continue to use technology to support the learning. We talked a little bit about the advisory program, really looking forward for that to continue, because I think that, again, it was identified as a long-term goal that we accelerated, and I think there were great benefits to our students and our teachers. Our teachers felt connected to students differently. And then I would say that something that is yet to be determined is some of our family engagement practices, where last year everything was virtual. We're hopeful, and we saw some good participation And we got some good feedback on, a virtual back to school night and some of the coffee hours and things. So that's something that we'll have to assess to see what parts do we keep, kind of in a remote or a hybrid fashion, and what parts do we kind of go back. So I'm excited to be back to a more typical year, and I don't want to just fall back into all of our old routines and procedures. I think there are opportunities to assess what worked and what didn't, and how we can continue it.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people's takeaway is. It was a difficult year, but there are some things that sort of we learned and sort of maybe advanced and came, can keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I very much appreciate you taking some time, and I wish you all the best in this upcoming school year.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you.
So there you have it, an in-depth look at Burlington Public Schools' plans for a full return this fall. I'd like to thank my guests, Superintendent Eric Conti, BHS Director of Counseling Joe Attubato, and Marshall Simons Middle School Principal Kari Perchase. I'd also like to thank all of you for watching. We'll be back next month with another edition of BNEWS In Depth, so stay tuned.